prosecution desire to cross-examine.
Do you say, witness, that the SA had nothing to do with atrocities against the people of the occupied territories?
Ich habe das letzte nicht ganz verstanden. Mit den Gräueln?
Against the people of the territories occupied by Germany, foreign territories occupied by Germany.
Die SA-Führung?
Now, it's a perfectly simple question. You know, you've made your speeches now. Answer yes or no. Do you say yes or no? Had the SA anything to do with atrocities against the people of the occupied territories?
Ich habe die Absicht, der Wahrheit gemäß zu antworten. Infolgedessen kann ich über meine Antworten mir auch nichts vorschreiben.
Can a true answer not be given by yes or no?
Yes, you can explain afterwards, you know. If you answer the question yes or no, you can then give your explanation.
Die SA hatte mit der Behandlung der Völker in den besetzten Gebieten nichts zu tun.
I see. Well, now, I want you to look at your report on the SA during the war, which, my lord, the tribunal will find in the document book 16B at page 113. My lord, it is number 4011 PS and will become Exhibit GB 596. But witness, just before you look at that, do you remember saying before the commission, at the beginning of the war with Poland, the SA group Sudeten carried out transports of prisoners of war into the camps? Other SA groups in the East may have been used for similar purposes. Later on, the SA leaders and the SA as an organization had nothing to do with this question. Do you remember saying that? Page 336 of the transcript. That one of your groups carried out transports of prisoners of war into camps, and other SA groups may have been used for similar purposes. Do you remember saying that to the Commissioner? If you would take your mind from that document and just address it to the point as to whether you've said that before the Commission, it would help. Do you remember saying that before the Commission?
Ich habe vor der Kommission zugegeben, und das bestreite ich auch heute nicht, dass die SA-Gruppe Sudeten Kriegsgefangene im Auftrag der Wehrmacht zu Sammelstellen zurückgeführt hat im Polenfeldzug. Vorher wurde ich aber von Ihnen, Herr Anklagevertreter, nach der Behandlung der Bevölkerung in den besetzten Gebieten befragt.
Well, I've got your answer to that, but one must take it by stages. You admit that you said that before the Commission. That the Sudeten group dealt with transports of prisoners of war into camps, and that other SA groups in the East may have been used for a similar purpose. Do you remember saying that? I'm only putting the report of what you said, witness. Do you admit that you said it?
Das habe ich ja eben schon gesagt.
Right. Now let's look at your report. This is a report made by you on the 23rd of June, 1941. And you'll see that after a general paragraph, my lord, if you'd turn to page 116, it's page 4 of the original document, and witness, if you'd go on to the heading section 4A, You will see the SA men who have remained in the communication zone primarily care for the maintenance of the SA organization. All units, even the smallest ones, are alive, and the men willingly sacrifice their spare time for duty in the party. This includes assistance to the political leaders in the educational and orientation tasks, propaganda and counter-propaganda, preparations for meetings, control of the population in frontier areas. Is that correct, what you wrote in 1941?
Das stimmt ganz genau. Hinterland ist nämlich die Heimat.
Well, now,
Und nicht besetzte Gebiete.
Now just look on to page 117 of the English version, my lord. I think it's page 123, witness, of your version. You've got 123. It's page 5 of the original. Oh, it's page 5 of the document. It's the next page, page 5. Now, do you see under C, the duty achievements of the SA, which deal with direct support of the armed forces and which benefit the power of German arms, have developed in all directions. At the time this report is written, and or in the previous weeks, the following were employed. Then the second of these, 21 groups of SA men for guarding prisoners. Where were the 21 groups guarding prisoners?
Im Deutschen Reichsgebiet, während des Polenfeldzugs.
This is 1941. The Polish campaign had been finished for 21 months. You see, you say that that's at the time the report is written or in the previous few weeks. Where were they guarding the prisoners then?
Dieser Bericht ist eine Zusammenfassung der Tätigkeit der SA im Kriege von Anbeginn an. Und da wird alles wieder aufgezählt, was früher auch von der SA Positives geleistet worden ist.
Well, didn't you hear what I put to you, and can't you read your own report? This says, at the time this report is written, or in the previous weeks. That is, in June 1941. It says they were guarding prisoners. I'm asking you, where were they guarding prisoners?
Man kann das ja nicht so hinnehmen, dass etwa 21 SA-Gruppen zur Bewachung von Kriegsgefangenen eingesetzt waren, sondern es steht da, bei 21 Gruppen haben SA-Männer...
Well, wait a minute. The question was, where did you say they were guarding prisoners? Nothing about the number 21. Where was it that they were guarding prisoners?
In Gefangenenlagern im Reichsgebiet, wo einzelne SA-Männer kurzfristig zur Wehrmacht, zur Bewachung von Kriegsgefangenen eingezogen worden sind.
What do you mean by the Reich area? In Germany as it was before the war began?
Ja. Ist es möglich, dass in den Westpreußen und im Generalgouvernement auch Kriegsgefangenenlager waren? Das entzieht sich aber meiner Kenntnis.
And in the Baltic provinces, witness, weren't there? And in the Baltic provinces.
Davon ist mir nichts bekannt.
Oh, well, we'll see if I can refresh your memory in a moment. But just not to leave this document, if you look at the next page, on page 6.
Before you pass from that page,
If your Lordship pleases.
there's a passage just before B, which perhaps you ought to put to him.
My Lord, I'm very grateful to your Lordship. If you would look just before B, you'll see the words numerous SA leaders and sub-leaders were furnished to the German Labour Front for duty in the Todt organization. Is that right?
Welche Seite ist das? Darf ich nochmal?
It's about 10 lines before the bit that I've just put to you about the 21 groups guarding the camps. It says numerous SA leaders and sub-leaders were furnished to the German Labour Front for duty in the Todt organization.
Wir haben Männer an die Organisation Todt abgegeben. Zur Arbeit.
Was that,
Die aber
was that for
damit aus
looking
der
after
SA
forced
ausschieden.
labour? Was that for looking after forced labour?
Nein, die haben wir abgegeben an die Organisation Todt und damit schieden sie aus den Befugnissen der SA aus.
Now, would you look at page 6 of the original, and you will see a heading, the pre-military training. Now, you see what's said there, and this is the second year of the war. This education, to the second paragraph, after the dealing with the SA war defense groups. This educational work is primarily to assist the fighting spirit, to retain and fortify the willingness to fight, and to harden the National Socialist communal idea in German men to become an uncompromising testimonial to the comradeship in arms. And then you give an account of the training, including signals and target practice, handling of rifles, shooting, throwing of hand grenades, and so on. Now, witness, you're very familiar with these publications. I suggest to you that that training, which is set out in your third report in the second year of the war, is exactly the same training as is set out in your reports in the training directives of 1934, 1938, and 1939. It's the same training as the SA had been giving to its membership for the last 7 years, almost word for word. Isn't it? Isn't that exactly the same as is contained in all your training directives?
Nein, das stimmt nicht. Vor dem
All right.
Krieg.
I'll put the training directives to you in due course. That's your answer. You say that that's not the same. I suggest that that is a deliberate untruth, and that this report covers the same ground, using practically the same language as your reports in 34, 38, your training directives in 34, 38, and 39. Now consider, because that's all I want the tribunal to be able to test your veracity. Do you still say that that report is not the same as the SA training directives in 34, 38, and 39? Do you or do you not?
Es kommt darauf an, wie dieser Dienst gehandhabt wurde. Und der Dienst...
I'm not asking you how the service is handled. I'm asking you on the contents of the training directives. And I'm putting to you a perfectly clear question. Isn't the training contained in this report in the 2 years after the beginning of the war exactly the same as the training laid down in the training directives of 34, 38, and 39? Now, do you want to maintain your answer that it isn't?
Wir haben vor dem Kriege keine vormilitärische oder nachmilitärische Ausbildung betrieben. Im Kriege haben wir alles getan, um die Wehrkraft des deutschen Volkes zu stärken. Was anderes kann ich darauf nicht antworten. Infolgedessen
Alright.
muss ich zu einem Nein kommen, denn das, was hier steht, ist etwas anderes, als was wir vor dem Kriege getan haben, praktisch getan haben.
All right. That's your answer. In time I shall put these directives to you quite shortly and the tribunal will judge. Now turn over to page 15 of the original. My Lord, that's page 127 of the book. Now, do you see the heading, Work Done by the SA in Regained Territories? You got that? Page 15.
Jawohl.
Work done by the SA in regained territories. The two SA groups, Vistula with headquarters at Danzig and Varta with headquarters at Posen, were formed in the east. The territory of Upper Silesia was assigned to the unit Silesia, the territory of Memel and Suwałki to the Baltic provinces Ostland unit. I'll ask you to note that, the Baltic provinces Ostland unit. Very soon the SA units formed a network of solid strong points for the National Socialist movement. The Vistula unit comprises 15 Standarten with 507 companies, Stürmen. The Varta unit, 28 Standarten, counting 684 companies. In these regions, also as in combat, note these words, also as in combat, the SA was the assault unit for the party. It assists in collecting German manpower, in strengthening it, and bringing it into alignment according to National Socialist principles. In that respect, it was often necessary to start by teaching the German language and then explaining the basic ideas of National Socialism. Many young racial Germans were trained as SA assistant leaders in SA schools. In these regions also, the SA service, practically speaking, is directed towards strengthening the defensive forces. It was therefore necessary to overcome the inferiority complexes of the racial Germans, the result of Polish suppression, and to bring their external appearance and bearing into keeping with SA standards. Then only was it possible to begin the real military training. The work of the SA in the West is also similar to that in the East. There it was possible in a short time to bring into the SA an important part of the male population through the recruiting of former German soldiers of the World War. The leaders of the Standarten were predominantly Reich German SA leaders. The Sturmbannner and Stürmer are practically without exception led by Alsatians who have received special training in a special SA school in the Reich. Reich German SA leaders and men stand at their side to advise and help. Well, now, I'm going to ask you quite a lot about the East, but I'll just leave the West with this one question. Didn't you mean by that paragraph that the SA was doing its best to help in the Germanization of Alsace?
Die SA hat dort ihre Organisation aufgebaut und die Männer zu Anständigkeit und zu SA-mäßiger Haltung charakterlich und auch äußerlich zu erziehen gesucht. Die Frage der Eindeutschung und so weiter spielte bei unserer Arbeit keine Rolle.
All right. Well, I'm not going to argue about words that are there, but I'd just like you to look at the procedure. The Chief of Staff That was Lutzer, wasn't it, in 1941? He was still alive. You see, it's the next paragraph. The Chief of Staff visited these territories in the east and west and gained a clear insight into the service, not only in the main cities, but particularly in the small and smallest garrisons of the SA. Did the Chief of Staff take his deputy with him on any of these visits? Yourself?
Im Osten war ich einmal dabei, im Westen nicht.
Well, now, just let's see. Perhaps we were fortunate in where you went to in the east. Did you ever go to Vilna?
Nein.
Well, now, let me see if you can't help us from your immense knowledge of the SA with which you've spoken this morning. Did you know an SA officer called Hingst, who was the Stadtkommandant at Vilna?
Hink. H-I.
Hingst. H-I-N-K-S-T. Hingst.
Nein, die kenne ich nicht.
You didn't know him? Just
Nein.
think. You don't remember him? Town Commissioner of Vilna.
Ich erinnere mich nicht.
You remember at Vilna, the old barracks were taken over and were known as the SA Kaserne, as the SA barracks. Didn't you know that?
Ich bin in meinem Leben nie in Vilna gewesen und weiß auch nicht, wer in Vilna tätig war von der SA oder von irgendwelchen anderen Stellen.
Well, but didn't you know that that one of the groups that were formed was a group in Vilna? Very interesting group, you know. They didn't quite do as big a job as the SS, but they killed 10,000 Jews in the autumn of 1941. Do you say that you never heard of that?
Ich habe das nicht verstanden.
Oh, it's perfectly plain. What I'm putting to you is that in September 1941, that 10,000 Jews were killed in Vilna, and that the people who rounded them up from the ghetto to take them out to be killed were the SA detachment in Vilna.
Ich bestreite das ganz entschieden. Die SA hat mit diesen Angelegenheiten nichts zu tun. SA war dabei nicht beteiligt.
All right.
Wir hatten in Vilna keine SA.
We'll just have a look at that. Would you look at an affidavit?
Before you pass on that, did you sign this document that's just been put to you?
Very much right.
This report?
Jawohl.
Much obliged. Well, now, would you look at document D964, which is an affidavit by Mr. Zloma Gol. Well, that'll become GB 597. Oh, I'm so sorry, my lord. It's page 55. I beg your lordship's pardon. Page 55. Now, this gentleman says, I am a Jew and lived in Vilna, Lithuania. During the German occupation, I was in Vilna ghetto. The administration of Vilna ghetto was managed by the SA. The town commissioner of Vilna, the Stadtkommissar, was an SA officer called Hingst. The land commissar for Vilna was an SA officer called Wolf. The advisor on Jewish questions was an SA officer called Murer. Now, in order to, do you remember an SA officer called Wolf or an SA officer called Murer in the Lithuania?
Ich habe weder den Namen Müller noch den Namen Hingst jemals gehört und bestreite ganz entschieden, dass wir eine SA-Gruppe in Vilna hatten.
Witness, have you got a copy of in German of D964?
Did I give him the number?
Yes, you give it.
964, ja.
And that's the affidavit of Mr. Gall. And I'd read you the first paragraph, and if you look at the first and second paragraph, if you look at the third paragraph, he says, in December 1943, 80 Jews from the ghetto, including 4 women and myself, and my friend Josef Beilich, were ordered by an SA Sturmführer, whose name I forget, to live in a large pit some distance from the town. This pit had originally been dug for an underground petrol tank. It was circular, 60 meters in diameter and 4 meters deep. When we lived in it, the top was partially covered with boarding, and there were 2 wooden rooms partitioned off, also a kitchen and a lavatory. We lived there 6 months altogether before we escaped. The pit was guarded by SA guards, and I give details below. And you'll see in paragraph 5 that he says that the SA men threw chains into the pit, and the Sturmführer ordered the Jewish foreman, for we were a working party, to fasten the chains on us. The chains were fastened round both ankles and round the waist. They weighed 2 kilos each, and we could only take small steps when wearing them. We wore them permanently for 6 months. The SA said that if any man removed the chains, he would be hanged. The 4 women were not chained. Then before we come to the work, I'd just like you to look at paragraph 10, because that describes the guards. The work of digging up the graves and building the pyres was supervised and guarded by about 80 guards. Of these, over 50 were SA men in brown uniform, armed with pistols and daggers and automatic guns, the guns always being cocked and pointed at us. The other 30 guards consisted partly of Lithuanians and partly of SD and SS. In the course of the work, the Lithuanian guards themselves were shot, presumably so that they should not say what had been done. The commander of the whole place was the SA officer Murer, the expert on Jewish questions, but he only inspected the work from time to time. The SA officer, Legel, actually commanded on the spot. At night, our pit was guarded by 10 or 12 of these guards. And then he says that the guards hit and stabbed us and that he was knocked over a pile of bodies, and that they were only allowed to go sick for 2 days. They went sick for more, they were shot. And then he says in paragraph 12 that of the 76 men in the pit, 11 were shot at work. Now I'd just like you to look very shortly at paragraphs 6, 7, 8, and 9, which describe the work. 7 says that the work was digging up mass graves and piling the bodies to funeral pyres and burning them. I was engaged in digging up the bodies. Beilich was engaged in sawing and arranging the wood. And then paragraph 8 says they dug up 68,000 bodies. I know this because 2 of the Jews in the pit with us were ordered by the Germans to keep count of the bodies. That was their sole job. The bodies were mixed: Jews, Polish priests, Russian prisoners of war. Amongst those that I dug up, I found my own brother. I found his identification papers on him. He had been dead 2 years when I dug him up, because I know that he was in a batch of 10,000 Jews from Vilna ghetto
who were shot in September 1941. And then he describes the procedure for making a funeral pyre in layers of wood and bodies, and throwing oil over it and burning it.
Are you telling the tribunal that you never heard of what had gone on in Vilna, or that there were any SA personnel concerned in it?
Ich habe dazu Folgendes zu erklären. Mit Bewachung von Ghettos...
Well, first of all, before you make the statement, will you answer my question? Do you say that you never heard of these happenings in Vilna, or that the SA were concerned in it?
Das behaupte ich ganz entschieden. Ich höre heute zum ersten Mal davon und wir haben auch damit nichts zu tun gehabt. Wir hatten keine SA in Litauen. Wir hatten nur SA im ehemaligen Generalgouvernement versucht aufzubauen. Das waren SA-Anwärter, Volksdeutsche. In Litauen hatten wir keine SA organisiert mit Bewachung von Ghettos und diesen Scheußlichkeiten, die, wenn sie vorgekommen sind, als solche gebrandmarkt werden müssen, hat weder die SA-Führung noch die SA als Organisation je was zu tun gehabt. Wohl könnte ich mir vorstellen, dass hier auch ein Missbrauch mit SA-Uniform und der Zugehörigkeit zur SA getrieben worden ist, nämlich von Litauern.
I see. Your explanation is that they've mistaken somebody wearing a brown shirt. Is that your explanation? Who had, I suppose, put a swastika on his arm, too, just to make it more difficult. You really telling the tribunal, who've been sitting here for 9 months listening to what's happened in these territories, that your explanation is that somebody's mistaken other people wearing brown shirts? Is that your explanation?
Das ist eine von den Erklärungen, die ich zu den Vorgängen zu geben habe.
My Lord, I only want to put in, I needn't to occupy time by putting into the witness, in view of what he said, document 975 is an additional declaration of Mr. Goll. Lord, that will become GB 598, and it explains the procedure by which the gold teeth were taken out of the corpses. Lord, I don't take it in detail because your Lordship has heard so much of how that procedure was carried out and the normal way for doing it. But your Lordship, it does say that the man Murer personally took the boxes with him. Well, now I'm going to come to Kaunas or Kovno. I want you just to tell me there. Do you say that you don't know an SA brigade Führer called Kramer, who was town governor of Kovno?
Vom SA-Brigadeführer Kramer haben wir bisher nicht gesprochen, Herr Vertreter der Anklage. Ich kenne einen SA-Brigadeführer...
No, I'm mentioning it now. I'm asking you, do you say or don't you that you knew... Do you say that you didn't know an SA brigade Führer called Kramer, who was town governor of Kaunas or Kovno, very well-known place?
Kovno ist mir durchaus bekannt, da stimme ich mit Ihnen überein. Aber den Namen möchte ich noch mal wissen. Kramer oder Kramer?
Kramer, and he was the German town governor and an SA brigade Führer. Kramer.
Ich kenne einen Brigadeführer Kramer. Ob der Stadtkommandant von Kovno war, weiß ich nicht.
Do you know SA Hauptsturmführer called Jordan, Jordan?
Nein.
And don't you know that the town governor's office in Kaunas was exclusively staffed by SA, even the girls in the office belonging to the SA women's section? Wearing brown SA shirts with swastika? Do you say that you never heard that?
Wir hatten in Kowno keine SA, ich kenne auch dort keine SA-Dienststelle. Wenn ein Kramer, der SA-Führer gewesen sein soll, dort tätig war, dann war er nicht als SA-Führer tätig. Mit der ganzen Angelegenheit hat die SA, Euer Lordschaft, nichts zu tun. Das möchte ich nochmal ganz besonders stark unterstreichen.
Well, now, let me just put two more of these people. Do you know an SA brigade Führer called Lenzen? L-E-N-S-Z-E-N, Lenzen?
Ein Brigadeführer Lenzen war früher mal beim Reichssportführer tätig. Dort habe ich ihn kennengelernt.
Did you know that Lenzen was commissioner for the rural district round Kaunas?
Wenn Lenzen Kommissar für ländliche Gebiete war, war er nicht von der SA als SA-Führer dort eingesetzt, sondern im Rahmen des Ostministeriums. Unterstand also nicht der SA, wenn er dort tätig war.
I see. Now, do you say that you hadn't an SA section, I don't know whether it would be a company or a smaller unit, guarding prisoners of war near Kaunas? You've told us, you see, that you had these units who were supporting the Wehrmacht in these territories. Are you swearing that there wasn't an SA unit guarding prisoners of war near Kaunas?
Wir haben bei Kowno keine SA-Einheiten organisiert. Mehr kann ich dazu nicht sagen. Wir haben SA organisiert im ehemaligen Generalgouvernement. Sonst haben wir im Osten, außer Westpreußen und ehemaligen Posen, SA nicht organisiert. Infolgedessen kann da gar keine SA bestehen.
Yes, for the sake of accuracy, Sir David, I don't think he had said that they had SA units supporting the Wehrmacht in these territories at Kaunas.
Not, my lord, it was in the east, I think in the east was the words. My lord, I
thought he said it was in the Reich area.
My lord, it was in the report. I'll just check it. I'm so sorry, my lord, if I have made a mistake. My lord, what he said, well,
I've
in
got,
his
Sir
report.
David, referring to the 23rd of June 41, that's the report.
Yes.
He said that's the home country. We had 21 groups guarding prisoners of war in the German Reich area. I mean in what was Germany before the war. I know nothing of the Baltic provinces.
Well, my lord, that I agree, entirely agree, because your lordship remember that he goes on to say that in the report itself, at the top of, in page 127, he said that there were two groups, one at Danzig and another at Varta, and then at Upper Silesia, and then he says the territory of Memo and Suwałki to the Baltic provinces Ostland unit. Well, that was what I had in mind, that there was a Baltic provinces Ostland.
What he said in the report, at any rate, I don't know whether
Yes,
he
my lord, I agree. Wasn't quite the same before he put the report. But, my lord, in view of that, I'll just briefly indicate the contents of this affidavit to your lordship. As the witness says that apart from knowing two of the people, he doesn't know anything about it. The first, the deponent says that he lived in the ghetto of Kaunas during the German occupation, and that he was on the Jewish Council of the ghetto dealing with statistics and supplies. As representative of the Jews
we haven't got this document.
Oh, haven't you? Lord,
No.
I'm so sorry. It's D968. D968, GB599. I'm very sorry, my lord, the fault was mine.
It's in the book, is it?
My lord, it's in the book at 61. 61. It's my fault.
Yes.
Yes, keep there. My Lord, he goes on to say, as representative of the Jews for rations, I had to deal directly with town governor's office, Hauptsturmführer SA Jordan section. The town governor's office was exclusively staffed by SA. Even the girls in the office wore brown SA uniform. Then he says the governor's called Kramer, who was a brigade Führer SA. Jordan was the advisor on Jewish affairs to Kramer. I know their ranks and that they were in the SA because they signed the orders which were posted in the ghetto. Then in paragraph 3, he describes a plundering operation. He says it was done exclusively by SA men. Jordan was with them. They all wore brown uniform. They took their property and shot 27 people. And then on the 13th of September, that's in the middle of the raid, Jordan and Sturmführer SA Kapen, with Brigade Führer Lenzen, who was commissioner for the rural district of Kaunas standing by, shot 3 men in his presence. Then 6, on the 21st or 22nd September 1941, I was in a labor detachment. I saw about 30 SA men in uniform conducting a group of some 300 Russian prisoners of war. The Russians were quite exhausted. They could barely walk. 2 collapsed and the SA shot them. The SA were beating them all the time. My labor detachment had to bury these Russians. Then, my Lord, the 7 just shows a piece of what one might call almost silly brutality, but it was conducted, making them march out and carry weights for a distance. But you'll notice that there were about 100 SA men guarding them, the Jews, armed with automatic pistols. And then number 8, on the 28th October 1941, there was a big action on in which 10,500 people from the ghetto were shot. The ghetto population was first divided into 2 groups, those for execution and those who were allowed to stay. The sorting was supervised in the morning by a man called Raucher, who was, I think, in the Gestapo or the SD, and later in the day 3 prominent SA men, Jordan, Kapen, and Perschel, came to help him. All these SA men were in uniform. I know the number of those who were shot because my job in the Jewish Council included the rationing, for which we had taken a census of the Jews. A new census was taken after these executions. And the next it says how Jordan told him to go and get 20 bodies of the people he had just shot. And number 10 says that Jordan asked for 530 intellectuals to work in archives. He was told they weren't available. Thereupon the SA, assisted by others in German uniform, which I cannot identify for certain, but I think it was SD, seized and shot 530 people at random. The SA personnel present included Jordan, Perschel, and Lenzen. Lord, that is Kaunas. Now, my Lord, the next town, the other of which I wanted to deal is Shaulin, which your Lordship will find that in document D969 at page 63 in the same document book. That becomes GB 600 and is an affidavit by deponent Leib Kiebart. Now, I just ask you, witness, did you know an SA Sturmführer called Schröpfer? SCHRO_PFE?
Einen Sturmführer Schröpfer kannte ich nicht in der SA.
Did you know an SA Sturmführer called Bub, B-U-B?
ist mir auch unbekannt.
Did you know a man in the SA whose rank, unfortunately, I haven't got, called Geveka, who became district commissioner for this area 130 miles south of Riga? Geveka, G-E-W-E-C-K-E.
Ist mir ebenfalls unbekannt. Die Gebietskommissare wurden überhaupt die Kommissare nicht von der SA eingesetzt, sondern vom Ostministerium. Darauf hatten wir keinerlei Einfluss.
No,
Weiß also auch die
the
Namen.
deponent says he was in the SA, and I'm just asking you to try and remember, did you know him? There's no doubt he exists. We've got captured documents signed by him, but I wanted to know, did you know him, Geveka?
Ja, ich habe Sie durchaus verstanden. Vorher scheinen Sie mich aber missverstanden zu haben, denn Sie behaupteten, dass ich Kramer und Lenzen nicht kenne. Das habe ich nicht behauptet, sondern ich habe nur behauptet...
No, I didn't say that, witness, and don't let's have any misunderstanding. I was just making quite sure, informing you that there's no doubt that Geveka was there because his name appears in captured documents. And I wanted you to be quite sure before you gave your answer that you didn't know him. You don't know him. Well, all right.
Nein, ich kenne ihn nicht.
Well, my lord, then I'll again take it quite shortly. My lord, the first two paragraphs, the deponent says that what his work was, he was a leather worker. The third, he says that he was cursed and beaten by the SA when he was at work. And then in paragraph 4, he says that Schröpfer was there first and afterwards Boob. And then in 5, he said, it is hard to judge, but I estimate that there must have been 700 to 800 SA men there at the beginning, but they decreased in numbers later. I knew them as SA because they wore brown uniform with swastika armlets. Later on, they used other Germans in the locality as auxiliaries. Then in 6, he says there were 4,500 Jews in the ghetto, which was very overcrowded. In August 1941, the SA therefore surrounded the whole ghetto, and numbers of them went into the houses and took out women, children, and old men, and put them into lorries and drove them away. I saw all this myself. It was done exclusively by SA. I saw them take children by the hair and throw them into the lorries. I did not see what happened to them, but a Lithuanian told me afterwards that they had driven 20 kilometers away and shot. He said he had seen the SA men make them undress and shoot them with their automatic pistols. And then paragraph 7 says that they were shot if they took in food into the ghetto, and describes the shooting of a master baker who had 4 or 5 cigarettes and some sausage, the hanging of this baker. Then paragraph 8 deals with Geveka. And, my lord, I'd ask the tribunal to note that the district commissioner in whose courtyard I worked was called Geveka. I saw him every day. He was in the SA. The SS took over from the SA in September 1943, and the ghetto then became a working camp. Now, my lord, if your lordship would be good enough to turn back to on to page 107. Lord, I think. Yes, my lord, 107. Your lordship will see a report from Geveka from Shaulin. My lord, that is document 3661 PS, which will become GB 601. It's dated the 8th of September 1941. From Shaulin, where he was regional commissioner, to the Reich Kommissar for the Ostland. My lord, I understood, I may be wrong, that Ostland is included Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia only, but my lord, that is the position. You said that the only SA organization in this area was the
unit formed by the defendant Frank in the Governor General, I think in April 1942. A unit, the SA unit of the Government General was formed under the orders of Lutzer, and the command was taken over by the defendant Frank. That's right, isn't it? And you said that he had a special staff for the actual carrying on of the unit, which I think was in the hands of two men called Seltz and Friedemund, if I caught your evidence right. Is that so?
Nein, so stimmt's nicht. Erstens waren das nicht die Namen Friedemann, sondern es war...
If they're not the names, please blame me. I took them down as I understand them. You tell us the right names. It's my fault entirely if I've got them wrong.
Ja.
What were the names?
Ja.
What were the names?
Ja, ich wollte ja eben aussprechen. Die richtigen Namen waren Pelz und Kühnemund. Und dieser Führungsstab, der unterstand nicht dem ehemaligen Generalgouverneur Frank, sondern dem Stabschef unmittelbar. Der übte die Führungsgeschäfte aus. Frank war lediglich ernannt als Führer der SA dort, wie ich das schon ausgeführt habe. Zu den anderen eidesstattlichen Erklärungen darf ich wohl mich nachher noch äußern. Sonst will ich das...
My Lord, your Lordship will remember it's in evidence in 3216 PS, United States Exhibit 424, the extract from des Archives, giving the foundation of that unit in the Governor General. What I want you to tell the tribunal witness is, what was the purpose of forming a unit in the Governor General, the Government General?
Das war ein zweierlei Zweck. Vorher darf ich aber noch mal die Frage stellen, zu den Evidevits über Kovno, Shaulin und Riga habe ich noch Aufklärungen zu geben, die zur Ergründung der Wahrheit notwendig sind. Ich wollte fragen, ob ich das jetzt tun darf oder soll ich das im Anschluss an die eben gestellte Frage tun?
The tribunal thinks it'll be better for your counsel to put questions to you in re-examination upon those affidavits.
Now, I want you to tell me, as shortly as you can, what was the purpose of forming a unit of the SA in the Government General in 1942?
Ja, der Zweck war ein zweifacher. Erstens mal, die im Generalgouvernement tätigen Reichsdeutschen kameradschaftlich und geschlossen, soweit sie der SA angehörten, zusammenzuhalten. Und zum Zweiten Volksdeutsche, die geneigt waren und geeignet erschienen, später der SA beizutreten, diese in die Gemeinschaft hereinzufügen, indem man ihnen die Sprache, die deutsche Sprache, deutsche Sitten und so weiter näher brachte und die Kameradschaft, die wir in der SA pflegten.
Now, I want to get that clear. You said it was an entirely peaceful purpose in the Government General. Do you adhere to what you have told the tribunal, that there were no other SA formations operating in the Eastern Territories, and particularly I ask you about the territory Ostland, that is, as I understand it, including the old countries of Lithuania, Estonia and Latvia. I've already put the evidence, certain evidence to you, but I want to get this clear. Are you prepared for your truth to be judged on the fact, on your answer to this question? Do you say there were no SA units operating in Ostland?
Ich bin bereit, darauf ganz klar zu antworten. Die oberste SA-Führung hat in diesen Gebieten Ostland, die Sie eben umschrieben mit Litauen, Lettland, wenn ich recht verstanden habe, eine SA-Organisation nicht aufgezogen. Eine deutsche SA wurde dort nicht gebildet. Wenn SA dort gebildet worden sein sollte, ist das eine wilde Organisation, die mit der SA-Führung nicht das Geringste zu tun hatte. Davon ist mir nichts bekannt, dass dort eine SA auf Anordnung der SA-Führung geschaffen wurde.
That's your answer. My Lord, I wonder if the tribunal would look for a moment. It's just a part of it at document 1475 PS, which is also R135, and it's a document book 16B, page 81. It's United States Exhibit 289. My Lord, I think it comes just after page 81 in the book. It's 81A, it should be. My Lord, now, would you give the witness a copy, Sergeant Major? My Lord, that's the protest of the Reich Kommissar for Ostland to the defendant Rosenberg, and the tribunal are probably familiar with that bit, the first page. It's a protest against killing off so many Jews in the Cottbus project because they would have been useful for slave labor, and in any case the locking men, women and children into barns and setting fire to them doesn't appear to be a suitable method for combating bands. That is the effect of that. Now, my Lord, there's attached to that on the next page the report of the 5th of June 1943 from the General Commissar of White Ruthenia to the defendant Rosenberg through the Reich Commissioner for Eastland. And, my Lord, it may be that the territory is slightly out of that I've mentioned, but at any rate I'll make it perfectly clear. My Lord, it begins by saying the result of the operation, 4,500 enemy dead and 5,000 dead suspected of belonging to bands, who apparently were the people who had been locked up and burned in barns. Then, my Lord, it gives the booty, and then the next paragraph, the operation affects the territory of the General District White Ruthenia in the area of Borisov. It concerns in particular the two counties of Begomy and Plechs-Shemitzi. At present, the police troops, together with the army, have advanced to Lake Pelik and have reached the whole front of the Berezina. The continuance of the battle takes place in the rear zone. Then there's another, they note the fact that only 492 rifles were taken for 4,500 enemy dead, and draw the obvious conclusion. Now, my Lord, it's the next sentence. By order of the chief of band combating, SS Obergruppenführer von dem Bach. Lord, that is the officer who gave evidence before the tribunal some months ago. Units of the, and witness, I ask you to note this, units of the Wehrmannschaften have also participated in the operation. S.A. Standartenführer Kunze was in command of the Wehrmannschaften. Now, witness, are you going to tell the tribunal that the S.A. Wehrmannschaften were not a section of the S.A. and that Standartenführer Kunze was not operating as a member of the S.A.? Are you?
Jawohl, sehr gerne und freudig werde ich darauf ganz klar antworten. Erstens steht hier nicht drin SA-Wehrmannschaften, sondern Wehrmannschaften. Zweitens, wenn da Wehrmannschaften...
But just pause there. Are you suggesting that Wehrmannschaften does not mean SA Wehrmannschaften, is not a unit of the SA? Is that your answer?
In dem Falle waren es keine Einheiten der SA. Das behaupte ich mit aller Bestimmtheit. Also es waren nicht SA von der SA gebildete oder aufgezogene Wehrmannschaften, wenn solche Wehrmannschaften dort überhaupt bestanden haben. Zweitens, wenn der SA Standartenführer Kunze diese dort angeblich gebildeten Wehrmannschaften geführt hat, hat er sie keinesfalls in seiner Eigenschaft als SA-Führer geführt, sondern im Rahmen der Ostverwaltung.
That he was in command of the Wehrmannschaften. You saying that when you've got a well-known SA formation, the Wehrmannschaften, commanded by an SA Standartenführer, and you're telling the tribunal that they weren't operating as SA at all. Is that your evidence? You really ask the tribunal to believe that? All right, well, I've got another document to you. My Lord, if you turn to page 64a, you'll find document 970.
Ich habe hierzu noch etwas zu sagen. Das will ich nicht nur dem Gericht nicht glauben machen, sondern das war so. SA-Wehrmannschaften ist ein ganz fester Begriff. Es gab auch Wehrmannschaften anderwärts, die mit der SA nichts zu tun hatten. Anscheinend waren das hier solche. Wir hatten dort keine Wehrmannschaften und der Standartenführer Kunze hat dort nicht als SA-Führer gehandelt. Die SA-Führung und die Organisation hat weder mit dieser noch mit den vorhin geschilderten Vorgängen in Shaulin, Riga und Kowno irgendetwas zu tun.
Well, now, witness, and just be careful before you answer this. Do you say that there were no SA Einsatz Commandos securing forced labor inside the government general? Perfectly simple question. Do you say that there were no SA Einsatz Commandos collecting forced labor inside the government general?
Die SA kannte Einsatzkommandos überhaupt nicht.
Well, I suggest to you that
Die
is
SA-Führung.
absolutely untrue, and I'll ask you to look at document D970. Lord, your Lord, that will become GB 602, and your Lordship will find it at page 64A. Lord, this is a report to the defendant Frank as Governor General, dated the 25th of September 1944. The subject is the prior of the Carmelite monastery at Juettner, who was shot at by one of the SA Einsatz Commandos mentioned. Let me put it. The incident under consideration took place within the framework of the action for obtaining people for the carrying out of special building plans in the district of Ilkenau. It came to the knowledge of the sub-regional commander of the security police and SD in Krakow via the branch office of Kressendorf and the strong point of Wohlbronn. As the place where the deed was committed lies within the area of the Einsatz Stab of Ilkenau, the investigations were carried out by the regional state police headquarters at Katowice, branch post Ilkenau. The results of the investigations provide the following facts. The possibility of taking out the planned building operations in carrying out the planned building operations in the area in question within the period laid down was made doubtful by the fact that the various communities did not provide the number of workers imposed on them. As a result of the construction staff at Katowice gave a special detachment composed of 12 SA men orders to bring in workers from the various villages. The execution of this task by this SA Einsatz Commando was in any case carried out by them in such a way. They first approached the village beadle and presented the demand. Then it goes on to describe how when it was refused, they
searched the houses. Some of the inhabitants offered resistance which had to be broken by the use of arms. In view of the fact that partisans had several times appeared in this area during recent times, the SA men reckoned that partisans were living in the villages during the day disguised as civilians. Besides that, when workers were obtained, the local conditions were taken into account. That's the first one, collecting forced labor from this village. Now we have another SA commando. The prior of Juettner monastery was seized by members of the SA Einsatz Commando Novojuva Gora. He was told to remain with the men of the SA Einsatz Commando for the time being, while the members of the detachment were in the house in order to search it for workers. The prior, according to what the regional state police headquarters Katowice established, used this opportunity, which seemed suitable to him, to escape, as he did not stop when shouted at several times and after some warning shots had been fired, but on the contrary ran even faster and tried to escape. Arms were used. The prior had been arrested because he was alleged to have made negative statements to other workers about the Ostwall, the Eastern Defensive Line, and the building undertaking, which tended to weaken the labourers' already weak will to work in a still more unfavourable manner. It was intended to take the priest first to the constructional staff and from there to the office of the security police. Now note the last paragraph, and this is according to the regional state police at Katowice. Steps are to be taken to ensure that in future such operations are carried out not by SA men but by police officials. Now witness, why did you tell the tribunal 10 minutes ago that there weren't any SA Einsatz Commandos and that they never searched for forced labor in the government general? Why did you say it? You knew it was untrue. Why did you say it?
Das ist nicht unwahr, sondern ich wiederhole diese Aussage nochmals und bleibe dabei, dass die SA Einsatzkommandos nicht hatte. Hier diese SA-Männer, die sind wohl herangezogen worden von der Stelle, die den Bericht erstattet hat. Und zwar notdienstverpflichtet, anders kann ich mir das nicht erklären, als Hilfspolizisten. Und die berichtende Stelle hat dieses als notdienstverpflichtete Hilfspolizeikommando schlechthin als SA-Einsatzkommando in seinem Sprachgebrauch bezeichnet. Von uns stammt dieser Begriff nicht. Wir hatten keine, haben auch keine solchen gebildet. Und die Verantwortlichkeit lag hier nicht bei der SA für die Handlungen, die durchgeführt wurden, sondern bei der Stelle, die die Männer eingesetzt hat. Ich kann auch hinzufügen, dass wir gerade mit der Polizeistelle im Generalgouvernement wiederholt für den zu häufigen Einsatz von SA-Angehörigen des Generalgouvernements zu Polizeizwecken Stellung genommen haben. Wir wollten das nicht, wir wollten keine Polizeidienste durch die SA erfüllen lassen. Sie wurden aber zeitweise herangezogen aufgrund gesetzlicher Bestimmungen als Hilfspolizeibeamten. Wenn zum Schluss es heißt, in Zukunft nicht mehr SA-Männer, sondern Polizeibeamte, das soll das zweifellos heißen, nicht Hilfspolizeibeamte, sondern richtige Polizeibeamte. Und die Hilfspolizisten hat man hier...
shared to the full your objection to the way the SA men, to the SA doing this work, and also to have objected to the brutal method in which they carried it out. But do I gather from that long answer of yours that you do know that SA men were being used as auxiliary police in the government general? Is that what you're telling the tribunal?
Wir haben von den dort tätigen SA-Führern Kühnemund wiederholt Berichte bekommen, dass SA-Männer aufgrund gesetzlicher Bestimmungen zu Polizeidienst verpflichtet worden sind.
I see. Well, that's something. Now, I want you to tell me this. You said in your report during the war, report on the war, that the SA had been used for guarding prisoners of war. Didn't the SA also guard forced labor camps?
Davon ist mir nichts bekannt, dass wir Arbeitslager bewacht haben sollen.
Well, now, let me give you the names of some of the camps which I suggest you guarded. Sackrau, forced labor camp of which the inmates were all Jews. Mechtau, Markstadt, Klittendorf, Faulbrück, Reichenbach, Annaberg.
Ich höre die Namen als Arbeitslager heute zum ersten Male.
My Lord, your Lordship will find in the page 131 of the book 16b an affidavit from Rudolf Schoenberg, who speaks, Lord, that would be GB 601. My Lord, he speaks of the SA guarding these camps and of the conditions. He finishes by saying, all I wish to say here is that the SA in no way lagged behind the SS in their murderous and criminal methods at that time already, which was in 1940. Well, let me put another point to you. Did the SA, do you remember the SA guarding a labor camp at Frauenberg, near Admont? That was a labor camp for shirkers and drunkards of about 300 prisoners. Do you remember the SA guarding that? Did you know anything?
Habe ich nie davon gehört.
When I put the document, there's no doubt it's a personal report to Himmler. And you'll just have a look at it. It's 034. Lord, it has a certain melancholy interest in that it deals with the selection of Auschwitz as a concentration camp. But, my Lord, the point that I'm dealing with it is on this only this one point.
604. The last should have been 603.
Oh, my Lord, the affidavit? Oh, my Lord, the affidavit should have been 603, the number, and this is Exhibit 604. Now, would you just, would you look at that?
What page is it on?
I'm sorry, my Lord, 132, the next page. Now, that's a report from an SS Oberführer called Glücks, whom I think whose name we're not unfamiliar with. And it's a report to Himmler of the 21st of February 1940, in which the man Glücks deals with 5 possible concentration camps which Himmler might consider using. And the third of these, no, six possible concentration camps, but the third of these is a place called Frauenberg. And he says, Frauenberg is a labor camp set up by the Provincial Welfare Union of Styria for shirkers and drunkards. It consists of 5 wooden huts and can take 300 prisoners. The labor prisoners are exclusively Styrians who are paid for the work by the Provincial Welfare Union of Styria during their time in camp, 27 to 57 pfennig an hour, less food. The SA, about 20 men, do the guarding. Then the labor prisoners are employed in 2 quarries and on building roads. And it says the whole place is now state property. Formerly it belonged to the Admont Foundation. Now, witness, how would it come that these SA men were employed in guarding a labor camp, and you, the Deputy Chief of Staff, would know nothing about the fact that SA men are employed on labor camps? How could you be ignorant of these facts? Just to explain to the tribunal, how could you be ignorant?
Diese Männer haben, wenn die eingesetzt worden sind, als Hilfspolizeibeamte verpflichtet gehandelt. Genau wie NSKK-Männer oder jeder andere Staatsbürger als Hilfspolizist gesetzlich verpflichtet werden konnte, wurden auch SA-Männer aufgrund der gesetzlichen Bestimmungen als Hilfspolizei verpflichtet. Das war eine staatliche Maßnahme, die mit der SA nichts zu tun hat, auf die die SA keinen Einfluss hat und von der die SA auch nichts wissen konnte. Es war unmöglich, dass die SA-Führung über das Geschick jedes einzelnen Mannes, wie es hier an mich in der Frage zum Ausdruck kommt, Bescheid wissen konnte. Das war völlig ausgeschlossen. Das waren nicht SA-Männer, sondern die waren im Polizeidienst verpflichtete Leute.
Well, now, I've suggested to you and put the evidence of the way that the SA were occupied during the war years. I now want you to ask you a little about the training which brought them into the condition where they do these pieces of work. Do you deny that the SA was the bearer of the military thought of Germany?
Es sind mir in der Vorverhandlung schon solche Fragen gestellt. Man verwechselt immer Wehrgedanken mit militärischen Gedanken. Die SA war Träger des Wehrgedankens. Das hat mit militärischem Dienst und mit militärischer Ausbildung nichts zu tun.
And you say that it's nothing to do with the cultivation of the offensive spirit, do you?
Keineswegs, nicht das Geringste.
Well, why did your friend Lutzer, of whom you've told us so much, in his lecture in 1939, put the two things together so strongly? Lord, it's only a short reference from a document that's already in 3215 PS, which is United States Exhibit 426. And, my Lord, it's in the original SA document book. Now, this is an article by Lutzer as head of the SA on SA military training, dated the 11th of March 1939. And he says that the men never forgot the mission of the Führer to require the military training of the German men and to reconstruct the military spirit of the German people. And he quotes the very well-known passage from Mein Kampf, which I'm sure, witness, you know by heart. The sport troop of the SA shall be the bearer of the military thought of a free people. And he gives Hitler's words, give the German nation 6 million perfectly trained bodies in sport, all fanatically inspired with love for the fatherland and trained to the highest offensive spirit. Isn't that, in a sentence, aren't these words of your chief, Lutzer, the spirit and aim under which you worked to train the SA from 1934 to 1939?
Ich muss wirklich mich wundern, dass der Herr Anklagevertreter in den langen Monaten der Verhandlungen den Unterschied zwischen Wehrgedanken und militärischer Ausbildung noch nicht gefunden hat. In der Vorverhandlung vor dem kleinen Hof ist hier eingehend drüber gesprochen worden. Lutzer hat nicht von militärischer Ausbildung geschrieben. Er hat von Wehrerziehung geschrieben. Das ist etwas ganz anderes als militärische Ausbildung. Wir haben das getan, was jedes Land von seinen Patrioten erwartet. Eine Wehrerziehung, eine körperliche und sittliche Ertüchtigung der Menschen. Sonst nichts. aber keine Kriegsvorbereitung, wie Sie mir unterzuschieben suchen, betrieben.
Now, if that's what you say, why was it that as early as the 25th of July 1933, the SA command was ordering no publicity about technical, signal and motorized companies or separate air wings because they may be taken as an infringement of Versailles? Well, that's document D44 US 428. My Lord, it's the first document in the book. Why was your leadership saying that what the SA was doing in the way with these technical units would be construed as an infringement of Versailles, and any publicity was to endanger the person publicizing it with a prosecution for high treason if you weren't doing military training?
Auch darüber habe ich vor der Gerichtskommission bereits ausgesagt. Dieser Befehl hing zusammen mit den römischen Milizbestrebungen. Die Einzelheiten müssen aus dem Protokoll ersichtlich sein. Wenn Euer Lordschaft wünschen, wiederhole ich das damals Angegebene.
Yes, answer the question. Answer the question.
Why were you afraid that the SA training and formation of technical units would be considered an infringement of the Treaty of Versailles if they were not military?
Die Verhandlungen Röms mit den ausländischen Staaten waren nicht abgeschlossen. Infolgedessen hätte ein falscher Verdacht entstehen können.
Well then, why was von Reichenau suggesting in May 1933 that the Supreme SA Command should combine representation with the party on the Reich Defense Council? Why were you to be represented on the Reich Defense Council if you weren't a military, conducting military training? Lord, that is, I think, a new document. It's PS 2822, and it become GB 605. It's in the old book. My Lord, that document was never put in, but Your Lordship will find it in the old SA document book. I'm afraid that's not paged, but it's in the number 2822 PS. My Lord, it's strictly confidential, 26 May 1933, from the Chief of the Ministerial Office in the War Department to the Supreme SA Command. Your Lordship sees it's very short. It's from von Reichenau. I don't know what his rank was then. He's, I think, either a general or a field marshal after. In addition to my letter of 22nd May 1933, may I bring to your attention that the desire has been transmitted to me from the Defense Policy Bureau of the party to be also represented in the Reich Defense Council. I want to submit for consideration that this representation be combined in personal union with the representation of the Supreme SA Command, that possibly one suitable person be charged with both representations. Why was the SA Supreme Command making representations to be represented on the Reich Defense Council if it was not doing military training?
Die Vertretung im Reichsverteidigungsrat hat mit militärischem Training gar nichts zu tun. Es war damals, das habe ich auch vor dem kleinen Hof schon ausgeführt, für den Fall, dass wir die Reparationen nicht zahlen konnten und mit einem Einmarsch vom Westen gerechnet werden musste, vorgesehen, dass das linke Rheinufer von den wehrfähigen Deutschen geräumt wird. Diese Räumung war der SA zur Durchführung übertragen, über die Partei. Insofern hatte die SA und die Parteien ein Interesse daran, was in dem sogenannten Reichsverteidigungsrat besprochen wird.